Hi everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel, What Colorful Worlds. Today I'm very excited to show you this video because this is one that commemorates a milestone for me. I am now officially 1/4 of the way through with Magical Worlds. This book is special to me not only because it's a really pretty one that I really like from Johanna Basford, but also because I'm turning this into my first full book color along. So all of the 20 pages that I have completed will be up on my channel as color alongs as well. So I want to show you all the different pages that I have done and just kind of go through my thought process of how I picked the colors and what my experience was like coloring them. Let's turn the camera and get started. Alright, so here's my copy of Magical Worlds. To begin, I'm just going to show you how I track the different pages because I find this to be very helpful in knowing how many pages are done, and also it's a nice way of kind of seeing the spread of where I color everything. So I gave each page a different name. So for instance, I called one Space Mandala because it was a mandala shape with a space theme. Otherwise I have things such as Moth 1, Moth 2, Moth 3 because she has 3 different moths, or Rabbit 1 or Rabbit 2, and that's just a way for me to kind of like track which pages are which. This is also where I would track all the completed dates because normally I would write the dates on the image itself. However, I didn't like that because it kind of detracted from the overall effect, so I found this a nice way of doing it. And then here, this is just kind of like my goal for what I could color each month. Check mark is if I did that page that month. A square is if I skipped that page, and a cross is if I did that page on an earlier month. And then here it just kind of shows if I'm behind schedule or not, because my goal initially was to try to color 4 pages a month. I'm definitely behind that. It's a bit tiring to do 4 pages a month, but if I do at least 1, I'm happy. And here, this is also how I kind of show my pages. There's 79, I rounded it to 80, and then that's the percentage breakdown, and then I do little tally marks to see if I am done, and I had achieved my goal on the 29th of July. Alright, so to go through these pages, instead of going through it chronologically, I'm just going to go through it in the order of the book, and I'll just kind of explain to you a tiny bit about those different pages. So the first one I want to show you is this Magical Items wallpaper. This one here was done in conjunction with its sister, which is over here. And so for these two, it was a very long-standing whip for me. And it's the only whip I've ever had in this book, actually. And my long-standing was probably like 3 months. And it took me a while to kind of come into it because I was trying to figure out how to make a variety of different colors work well together, and so it took a lot of concentration to kind of get that there. And what's cool about these 2 pages is that they're actually the exact same colors for all the elements. However, by having a very different background, it makes such a big difference in terms of how you can interpret and see the page. So the background here I did with my Thule Art paint pen, which is a nice way to do a black background if you have a lot of details. And because I would say like using a black paint pen for a large area is not good because then you can see the strokes, but for a small area like this, the strokes are minimized and it helps with all of the small details. I also had to draw back in some of these extra fine stems. This one over here was done with Derwent Inktense. And I actually did Inktense on top of polychromos. And that's a technique that could be interesting. Just for you to know is if you put a layer of Inktense on top of a pencil, it can help smooth it out. Normally you do the water medium below, but you can actually do it on top if it's Inktense, because Inktense being just kind of an ink will stick a bit better than watercolor, which might not stick very well to any waxy coloring pencil that's underneath. So yeah, so I'm happy to finally have these done. I'm really glad with how they turned out, and I'm glad I don't have it as a whip anymore as well. So moving on, I recently completed this book belongs to page. I was trying to do a bit of a bouquet effect. And at first I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with this because if it's such a small area with so much white space, I get a bit overwhelmed. But I did see, and I think it's someone called Angela because it said this book belongs to Angela on the Pinterest image I used as a reference. What she had done was create this little square, and then she had her background come in that way. And so very much inspired by what she did. I kind of did the same kind of square, except I decided to turn the background into a bouquet background and switch out some of these colors. I'm not fully sure if I like how I went pastel with some of these colors, but at the same time I think it's a nice contrast. And I'm glad I didn't bring the color into the This Book Belongs To page. I just left that blank. And so it was a quick page to do, an easy page to do, and one I actually completed fairly recently as well. I did this one in July. And pretty much all Prismacolor pencils. Most of my work is Prismacolor pencil in this book, and I think that's because it's a pencil that's very easily accessible for many people. And it's one that's often used in color alongs on YouTube, and so I think a lot of people tend to own a set. And so it's also the first set that I've owned, and it's the one I'm the most comfortable with. And so rather than like switching between different sets, just sticking with one set mostly for this book, I thought would be an easy way of helping people follow along. All right, so this page here, I think, is what really got me into knowing that this full book color along would be feasible, because I got a lot of really good traction on these small vignettes when I first posted them. Especially this one here got quite a lot of views and tractions on my YouTube channel. And so this page gave me hope that my idea of doing a full book color along in magical worlds could actually work and be something that people would be interested in seeing or following. And in doing so, I also met members of the community, and we've become very chatty. And so it's just really nice to have, like, I didn't really expect that doing a full book color along would get me more friends in the coloring community, but it has, and that's been really sweet. So for this one here, I just started with some colors over here using a mix of my Prismacolor pencils and some Thule art paint pens. And then to kind of keep things cohesive and consistent, I decided to use the exact same colors, trying not to add too many extra pencils for the rest of it. And then that became an interesting challenge of how do I, for instance, make like this kind of blue water, but have it be different from the sky. And I started to create other kind of color combos I wouldn't have done otherwise. There's something I think very magical about having that limited set of pencils and really pushing them to the extreme to see the different kind of blends and combinations that you can do with them. This one here, for instance, was using, I think, that very light green, because I didn't have any yellow, with, I might be misremembering. Okay, I have neon, so I was using the neon yellow with the indigo blue to kind of create this water effect down here. And over here, I think I had used the neon with the pink and the indigo, and I kind of was trying to create a bit of a woody color when I, of course, didn't have any woody colors for the rest of it. So it worked out really well, and it was a fun way to also kind of learn how to do this soft, like, I guess I don't know what to call it, like a color mist, just kind of like a fade out of some colors behind an image. And that was nice to kind of practice that, because I've been wanting to do that for a while. And then I decided to bring those same colors over to this side a bit later. And so this was, I think, like a month later, I came to this side here, in part because I like the idea of having both pages look as even as possible. I think that's really nice. I'm glad I did that, because it just came across as really, really magical. But of course I had to make sure that the castle was still that Disney Princess Castle theme. I really wanted to keep that there. So yeah, so these are two different pages that I have. Okay, so moving on, I also had completed this octopus here. This is probably, I think, my least favorite page that I've colored in this book so far. And I wasn't really sure if the colors worked well together. It's a bit confusing for me because you have the sky, you have the water, but then like on top of the octopus you have an island, and so trying to get all of the elements to be cohesive in this shape was a bit difficult for me at first. I think part of that's because I picked colors that were meant to be for each of the separate elements without fully considering if they work well together. So the water on its own looks really nice, the sky on its own looks nice, The sand on its own looks nice, but there's something about how they came together which don't look as nice for me. I think that's in part because the water here is just so vibrant, but then the sky is a bit more desaturated. And so having your desaturated versus your saturated, I think if I'm to analyze it, was the main issue that I didn't quite overcome in this page. And then on top of that, I wasn't really sure what to do with the shape, so I used some black acrylic paint for the background of it. At one point I was thinking I could have this be kind of like a window of a submarine, and I could try to draw in like little rivets and do metallic detailing. But I think at that point I was feeling a bit discouraged by the page, and I didn't want to ruin it too much by experimenting. And I was also at the point where I didn't really feel comfortable experimenting in this book if it was to be a full book color along, because it's hard, like my coloring style definitely has to shift if I'm turning it into a video for other people. Normally when I color, I do something, if I don't like it, I try to undo it, but I tried not to do that as much as possible for these videos because it's very misleading for people who are watching. So I just left it as a plain black background at that time. Right, and then moving forward, my next is this double page spread here. I very much love this double page spread that I did in May for Mermaid. And it was just such a fun one to put together, and I was using my brand new Albert Dürer pencils as well. And I was really trying to experiment and get to know those pencils. So this is where I started to break away from what I've normally been doing as my strategy, bringing in a different pencil, and just putting it out there in case someone else has an Albert Dürer pencil and would like to do the same technique, or at least just kind of look at the colors and maybe match it to whatever pencil sets they have. So for this, I have two separate color along videos. One of them is for just this background, another is for all of the inside elements, because it was just so big and so busy, and I don't like my videos getting too long, and so it's the only one I've split into two. The color palette I picked based off of Studio Ghibli, and so it's this reference photo here, and I just kind of like matched the colors in that reference photo to my Albert Dürer pencils and just kind of created sets of colors. And so I have my blue set, my pink set, my pinkish purple set, my purple set, my brownie set, teal, and my green set. And so just having it divided into those sets of colors also really helps, I think, pull it together in a nice way in my mind. So then that way I could just really focus on color placement and balance. And so I think that's the one main struggle that I had with creating this page. I wanted it to have just like a nice balance and spread of the colors without it being so evenly spread out that your eye doesn't really have a focus point. And that's part of why I decided to have this be only blue here, just so that I can have it be pulled in towards the center a tiny bit more. And I think it did work out. It's two of my favorite pages, I think, in this book so far. And then this one here is one I had completed very recently, and I used a color cube to help me pick these colors. Color cube is right here. And the pencils I went back to using were Prismacolor pencils. However, I used a tiny bit of some ink pad for this blue shimmer in the background, and that's because I felt like I needed a tiny bit of a background, but adding in a full background might have detracted away from the main piece itself. But having just like this little wash of color that kind of bleeds out of the line slightly is a technique that Erica over on Elm Colors tends to use a lot in her work that I've been trying to adopt as well. And I do have some of my Jelly Roll Metallic Gold on the piece as well, and I just kind of like love the colors here. I think they're very elegant, I think they're very delicate, and it wasn't quite like it doesn't quite match that color cube card, right? Like the color cube card is way more vibrant, and yet I think what I like about just being inspired from different color palettes is that even if you're using the same colors, the way you apply them and just like what proportions you shift towards really change the overall effect and look. And so here, for instance, having the focus be very heavily on the pinks and the greens kind of shifts it towards like this kind of a balance in a really cool way. And it would look like a very different page, for instance, if you were to emphasize the oranges and the blues and just have minimal pinks and greens. And so I think that's something that's really cool about color palettes. You can make the exact same color palette look very, very different depending on your balance. Alright, so you had a bit of a sneak peek on this page when I had showed you this page. This one was one of the first ones I had completed, and I chose it because on my YouTube, in the community tab, I asked people what they would like me to color, and someone said this page here, and so I was on it. The colors were decided on just like a little, I don't know what it's called, mobile, like a hanging mobile I had when I was a child that was the sun on one side, or sorry, it's like a sun and a moon around each other, and it was made of wood, and it was painted with these colors with gold on the edge, and it was just like hanging above my bed for a while. And so kind of remembering those colors, I kind of decided to pull those here. I'm really happy, I think, with kind of mixing my metallics. Normally I don't mix my metals together, but I think it worked out here, having my silver versus having my gold. And I'm glad that I made the stars silver instead of white, because it really does add this extra shine to it, especially since I blended these pencils towards the stars to kind of like, almost like a bouquet effect, have a little glow around each star. I also really loved the colors I did with the sun. I added in some pinks to the yellows, and it really softened it slightly and just made it just a really interesting like effect with the sun rays. And you can see how the neon yellow pencil at the edges really does add a bit of a shine to it. I really love that neon yellow pencil. I've been finding it so useful in my coloring. All right, so moving down. All right, these baby dragons. So these baby dragons took me a while to finish as well, and it was at a part where I was really slowing down in the color alongs. And I think they trumped me because people were requesting that I would show them the baby dragons, and so I wanted to do it because of that. However, I just didn't have any idea of how I wanted to do it. And so when I'm starting to color something without really knowing how I wanted to go, it just really made me a bit stuck. And so I think I started with this dragon. Yeah, I think I did from here, 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 and here. And so I kept on getting more and more stuck each time I would do a baby dragon. I think this is around Christmas as well. And that's in part because when I picked the colors, I wasn't really thinking about what the colors would look like all together. And so then each time I would switch to a different set of colors, I was just praying that they would work well together as a combo. And I think miraculously it did work well. Having the grass unifies the piece for sure. And then even things such as having some glitter on the bellies and the wings I forgot to put on the wings there. But glitter on the bellies and the wings of the dinosaurs also adds a sense of cohesion as well between the pieces. And so for this one here, I was also really debating about what to do with the background because the perspective of it was confusing me. It's not as though they're on a plane where like you're looking straight towards them with one point perspective, because if that was the case and these were like behind, these would be much smaller because you see things closer to you as being a bit bigger. And because the proportions were all the same, it meant that they're all kind of on the same vertical plane, kind of looking at you. And so how do you get it so that one is higher than another? So then I thought, what if the ground was filled with clouds and then it had like little, like, I guess, I don't know, pillars of like rock pillars with grass growing on top, poking out of the clouds. And so that would explain why this one's flying and then these three are kind of chilling. But then just like the thought of creating that and then maybe messing it up was so daunting, I decided not to do that at all. And then my final idea, I think, was to have it be like little boxes around each dragon. But again, because they're different shapes, right? This one's so wide and these ones are so narrow. The boxes would either look weird if they're the same shape, or look weird if they're different shapes. So I just didn't really know what to do for a background and I left it as is. So I think individually, each dragon is really cute. I just, as a composition, I'm not sure how to pull it together. And so that's, I think, something I struggle with in Magical Worlds quite a bit with Johanna's work, is that she doesn't build a scene. She gives you an element and a lot of blank space. And I feel like in work such as her older stuff like Enchanted Forest, she would build the scene a lot more, or it'll be easier to imagine what the rest of the scene would look like. And so it's hard to kind of imagine a background sometimes for her work is what I'm finding. And yeah, so for some of them I have succeeded. So for instance, like I guess moving into the candy house, I'll show you all the candies at the same time, I think, because I do work together as a unit. Here, okay. So the 3 candy pages, I wanted to do having the exact same color palette, and have it be just this really fun, solid color backgrounds. And so here it's a gouache background using purple and white mix to make it a bit more of a pastel purple. And then I used Prismacolor pencils and a ton of my Tooly Art paint pens. Like everything has a paint pen elements on here. I don't think I left any of her original line work. I mean, maybe some for the stems, but otherwise all of her original lines are colored out. And so I wanted to just have it be like candy and icing and just really have this be a Candyland. And that's what created this page. So I decided to continue with this concept over on this side here. And so with the remaining 2 candy elements, and I made this one a solid blue background, and I was initially thinking of having this be a solid background, but I decided instead to make it another sticker effect by having my paint pen just have it be a nice thick outline around each of the elements. So my trick with having the elements kind of look like stickers is you want to have some white space and kind of like blur any of the sharp lines. So for instance, like instead of having it follow the shape exactly, it's just a bit more of like a soft swoosh, if that makes sense. And what that does is it kind of makes it look like it's a sticker that was plopped on. And so over here, I'm a bit sad that I didn't mix the paint properly. My white gouache is completely dried out. And so instead of working it and spending a bit more time working it, I was impatient and I just started painting anyway. So I have this like white blob that's dried there now, and some of the colors, you can see they're not fully mixed. And so I advise you to make sure if you're using gouache or any other paints, really make sure that they're well mixed and blended before you start applying them. And yeah, so I think it's just a perfect color palette for a candy theme. And one thing that I decided to do here, because this was a little circle mandala and she has a few of these where there's nothing on the inside. And so I decided I'm going to draw in a candy on the inside, and so I drew in this round candy ball there because it was the simplest shape. Like I didn't want to mess with proportions with my pinwheels, or like circles that could be a bit too wonky with those kinds of pinwheels. So I just thought that like a nice lollipop with 2 stripes following those same color combos would be a nice, quick, easy thing to do. And I tried to make it look a bit more 3-dimensional by having some shadows on the edges, having some of my white stripes, and making sure that these stripes that go across curve slightly, because if they're straight across, it looks like it's cutting into a circle versus following the curve of a ball. And then have my highlight kind of be in the middle there. So those are the kind of candy-lined pages that I had done, and I think work really well with the theme of the pages there. All right, this one here is more recent. I did this in July of this month, so a month ago, in order to have it be for the watercolor month, because July is often considered watercolor month. And this is another one where I decided to branch away from just using Prismacolor pencils and use some more mixed media and just see how it is received on my channel. So I used watercolors for the background by completely masking off the foreground elements, and then I used a reference photo, you can see here, of the Milky Way. And using a reference photo I think is always really helpful in getting proportions right, just to have it look more cohesive. And so I used watercolor iridescent medium for the white in the center, and then a variety of different brands of watercolor paints towards the background, a black marker for the silhouette in the foreground, and then Prismacolor pencils for all of the main elements there. I'll show you this page in conjunction actually with this final page, because this is the other page that I had done, which is with last month really trying to get some watercolor action going. So for this one here, I was inspired by a page I saw on Pinterest from Hannah Carlson, and that's this one over here. And I just kind of loved how they had this purpley bluish background and had just such a beautiful luminescent glow, as though they're literally glowing in the dark, their flowers. And to kind of bring those elements here, I kind of went in with my purple background, and I used all three of my Prismacolor neon pencils for these moths as well. So the pink one, the orange one, and the yellow one. And I think that really helped with a lot of the glow. And it was a really fast background to do as well. It was just black, it's a purple, it's a pink, with some splatters of gold and white. And so another one where I was just kind of exploring with mixed media with the background, because otherwise there's just too much blank space in the background. And so it's having backgrounds that are a bit more like dynamic and artistic, I think are easier for me to do than trying to realistically draw in a scene for a background. And maybe that's something I can work on at some point, but just not today. All right, so moving on from our journey, I've not done these ones. I've shown you these two. So for this one here, I wanted to use a limited color palette, and I wanted to have a variety of greens that still looked different enough from each other that you can have a sense of movement and variety with the piece and not have it be too flat. So the greens I kind of chose for the frogs here were more earthy, versus these were a bit more cool. And they're cool because I added in some turquoise. So if you add in blue, it turns it a bit cooler. If you add in yellows, it makes it a bit warmer. On top of that, I went with gold and pink and just had it be a limited color. I was debating about having the background be blue as though it's water, but then after I finished the main elements, I realized it just looked so good as is. I didn't really feel the need to add in any background for this page. And so that's the frog mandala from Magical Worlds. Alright, did not do either of those pages. This one I'm saving for October for Halloween. And now I come to the two parent dragons. Another request from my subscribers, and another one where it took me forever to figure out what to do. And the main thing that was stopping me was, of course, the background. Because again, you have just one main element in this huge blank space. So I had started by doing, I think, this one here. And I wanted it to be nice and soft and pastels. And then for the background, I ended up using just soft pastels that I powdered from a stick, and a little cloud stencil. And so I decided to do the clouds only a third of the way up the page, and then just have a tiny bit of color come down from the edges to make it look as though she's floating above the clouds. And I think that effect worked really well. If you do clouds all the way up, it doesn't really have that sense of dimensionality, versus I found around a third of the way up and then have your sky afterwards makes it really look like she's floating on top of the clouds. And then I got stuck here. How do I make this dragon look the same as that? And I did this, I think, around Easter because of the egg. I eventually just decided, you know what, I'm going to color the dragon how I want to color it and then figure out the background. So I did the dragon, I wanted it to be a green dragon with a golden egg, and then I added in some red detailing to have a bit of contrast. So again, another nice limited color palette. And then initially I was thinking I could draw in wings because I saw someone had done an amazing job drawing in dragon wings. And then I practiced a bit and I failed, so I was like, I'm not doing that for a color along video. And then I decided to just ultimately just have it be a color gradient coming in, again with soft pastels, kind of taped off with masking tape at the edges. So nothing spectacularly amazing with the background, but it does really add to the piece and I think makes it look much better. And so that's how I overcame my struggle with Johanna and her insistence on not using backgrounds anymore in her work. And some more pieces, I have a lot of ideas for them, which is why they're flagged. More colored bits, and then the fox. I do believe this was the first one I actually colored. And I did it, again, because someone had requested it when I asked on my YouTube channel. And as I was coloring it, I just had this idea in my head of what I wanted it to look like, and then just did it all throughout. And this, I think, is the page I'm the most grateful for because it I felt like was a success on my YouTube for my first one coming out, and helped me kind of just develop my color along style. I don't really like those videos where it's multiple hours and it's a bit hard to track where you're at. And so for me, what I insist on doing with my color alongs is I will do like 1 or 2, and if the element repeats, I'll time lapse the rest or not even film it. And that's because you as an audience, you know what to do by looking at the technique from one. On your own, you can apply it to the rest if it's the exact same thing. And so that's how I kind of speed up my videos and try to get them closer to half an hour than 2 hours. And I think that really works, versus something like this where it's just one element and there's nothing repeating. I'll do this entire thing in real time. I also try to shift up my music too, because I don't like listening to color alongs and have the same song on repeat, unless it's like a lo-fi song and it's soft in the background and you kind of get lulled into it. But if it's too repetitive, it gets boring. And so I try to have a playlist of 5 different songs that I run through. So at least if it repeats, it's further down the line and you're not feeling so bored. But yeah, so this page I like a lot because it is so closely linked to my mind to figuring out my color along style. And I also have quite a few people on Instagram tag me who had actually followed my color along, and that's always so rewarding when people follow your color along. For sure, it makes you feel like you want to keep going with the book. All right, and then moving down, I think I'm starting to approach the end here. Yeah, that's it. That's the last page to show you from my Magical World series. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, bye!